Hello, and welcome to this episode of Wren Rambles. This episode is on the history of literature's Gothic monster. I'll be talking about what makes the line between man and monster, if there's a line between man and monster. Now the question may come up, what is a Gothic monster, Wren? Well, a Gothic monster of literature is a horror novel written in the Gothic period, which includes a monster. The Gothic period was from the late 1700s to the end of the 19th century. There will be three stories that are being focused on in this installation. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, and The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, straight on to it. What makes the monster monsterific and what makes the man good? Well, that brings the question, is the man good? In The Raven by Poe, the narrator seems to be speaking in a fit of melancholia. What points to this is when the speaker says, "Vainly I had sought to borrow from my book surcease of sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore." The Raven, Edgar Allan Poe, stanza 2. This man, presumably, is grieving for his lost love Lenore. In this scenario, from my view, the man is both monster and man, but he is a good man, at least not a bad one. And the monster is in his mind, and what may have just been the Raven knocking at the window in the bleak December night, and in his grief he was panicked and scared. The Raven may be a standout circumstance, but the real monster here is death and loneliness and grief, and how humans, and especially those prone to mental illness, deal with humongous change in circumstance. In Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. In The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the Doctor and Mr. are two halves of the same man. This tale tells of a man at war with the darker side of his soul, and in doing so, the public begins to believe there are two separate men. Because how could the good doctor do this? How could a man sworn to help be terrorizing the nearby populace? In this case, the man is not good because he was sworn to not harm people and he is hurting others, not he himself hurting. In my belief, what makes a bad man, at least in this case, is whether you hurt others. However, in my mind, it is much harder to be a good person than a bad one. What makes the difference between mistakes and intentional choices? Repetition. Jekyll Hyde had multiple opportunities to become a better person and not give in to the darkness that lurks beyond the surface. But he didn't. He took all those opportunities and chose evil. In Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, the man is not good, but the monster isn't bad. This story shows the dual nature of humanity and monsteranity. In real life, we all have choices. Choices which are sometimes hard and either way may hurt someone. Victor Frankenstein, the doctor, fails to see his actions have caused multiple people to die. And if you bring in the afterlife, he never let the monster, who was once a man, rest. Though, does aloofness make him bad? I don't know. The nameless monster is often vilified for things that were not his choices, completely at least. The reason I say he's not bad is because he never asked for this. And on Victor's orders, or lack thereof, he hurt people. We don't blow a gun for shooting, but that being is not a gun. He's a semi-sentient being that killed people. The story is told through the format of letters and showcases Victor's descent into madness, and the monster's insanity, or whatever. I think that at the bare bones is the nature of people to hurt others without even the intention of doing so. As for the history of the Gothic monster, the word Gothic has been used by many people as a derogatory term before the Gothic period was, known as the Gothic period. The word Gothic was synonymous for barbaric or grotesque. Before written word was common among the lower classes, there was one thing that everyone could view that did not need extensive understanding of the written word to grasp. to grasp the meaning. It was art. Gothic art was often found portrayed via stained glass and oil paintings in churches. Some great examples of this are Notre Dame in France and various churches around the world, specifically Europe. The art was stigmatized because it was often made by people descended from the Goths who fought against the Romans. When the 18th century rolled around, there was war and revolutions happening all over Europe, including the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars, as well as the rising of the middle class and lower classes beginning to have more autonomy within society. Needless to say, there was a lot of change happening. The Gothic Revolution, as I've coined it, started in Europe and moved to the Americas and eventually worldwide. The Gothic and macabre have often been confused with each other. In my mind, the difference is between the horror of death and then the horror that surrounds death. The difference may seem slight, but the categories end up having very different emotional results. The horror of death being macabre, and this horror that surrounds death being Gothic. Well, that's all I had planned for today's episode about the Gothic monster of literature. How this all ties into real life is as we as humans write to evict emotion. We make art to evict emotion. Of ourselves and others, it doesn't matter. But we also write about ourselves, whether directly or indirectly. But if you look into many authors, you will see a reflection of them in their art. So I have a question for you. How does your art and your writing reflect upon you? Do you accept what you see in this paper reflection? Well, that's enough existential questions. Have a lovely day, stay goblin-y. Bye-bye. Hello, and welcome to this episode on the history of the Gothic Monster. In this installment of Wren's Rambles, I'll be talking about what the line between what is Gothic period is from the late 1700s to the end of the 19th century. There will be 3 stories that I'm focusing on in this installation: Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, Dracula by Bram Stoker, and the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, and The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. I forgot to delete Dracula.